I'm an Elden Ring fanatic, but I'm also an anthropologist. In this video, we're going to take a brief but deep dive into the theme of suffering in Elden Ring. Now, when I speak of suffering, I want to make a distinction between suffering and pain. We tend to use these words interchangeably. But pain is usually associated with physical discomfort, the body. Suffering is more strongly related to mental, emotional anguish of the mind or soul. And it's the mental and emotional type of suffering that is the focus of this video. Cultures have historically developed many ways to explain the problem of suffering in general. Religion, for example, promises an end to all our suffering, maybe not in this life, but in the next life, in places like the Christian heaven, the Egyptian field of reeds, the Buddhist nirvana, the Norse Valhalla, the Indian happy hunting grounds, or what have you. Philosophy offers ways to alleviate or eliminate suffering by disciplining our minds, our thoughts and actions. Stoicism and hedonism are but two examples. Science seeks to end both physical and mental suffering by developing drugs to combat diseases and depression, and surgery to repair the body. Elden Ring offers up a specific kind of suffering. It's the kind of suffering that comes from failure, repeated failures. That red "you died" message you see after every death serves as a graphic reminder of your failure. Suffering rooted in failure is particularly painful because it messes with our self-confidence and makes us feel worthless, unworthy, and weak. Yet suffering is a privilege. It's a privilege reserved only for the living. When someone dies, we consider that their suffering has come to an end. Viktor Frankle, in his powerful book, Man's Search for Meaning, described his ordeal of surviving the Holocaust as a prisoner at a Nazi concentration camp. He knows a thing or two about all kinds of suffering. He writes, "If there is a meaning in life at all, then there must be a meaning in suffering. Suffering is an ineradicable part of life, even as fate and death. Without suffering and death, human life cannot be complete." Now this is my game character. I'm at a level 447 and you've been watching New Game 12 action here. My character and I have suffered thousands of deaths in over 1,000 hours of gameplay. I've named him after my favorite philosopher, Benedict Spinosa, who once said, "All things excellent are as difficult as they are rare." And I think Zaki echoed this sentiment when he said that toning down the difficulty of Elden Ring would break the game itself. That's because toning down the difficulty would effectively tone down the suffering, which would ironically reduce the emotional payoff for the player who beats the game. Elden Ring would be less excellent a game if it were made easier to play. From a gaming perspective, however, I think the difficult level is just right. There's joy in difficulty. Suffering and joy are opposites. You cannot have experienced one without having experienced the other. I'm all for less suffering in the world, but is ending suffering a good thing? Well, if suffering is what gives life any meaning at all, as Viktor Frankl suggests, then we must learn to think about suffering in a different way. And no other game excels at making the player suffer better than Elden Ring. The game forces us to engage in an orgy of suffering in order to lead us to the satisfying moment of being crowned the new Elden Lord. In a perverse way, suffering is a precondition to happiness, very much like failure is a precondition for success. I'd argue that players don't quit Elden Ring because it's too hard, too difficult. They quit because they can't endure the suffering any longer. And I can't blame them. And players who get good, well, they've simply learned to suffer less. Real life works just like that. We try something, we fail, sometimes multiple times. We either give up and move on or persevere and reap the rewards of success. We must learn to manage our suffering wisely. The developers of Elden Ring want us to suffer, not because they are cruel sadomasochists, but because it's through suffering that we will be perfected. There's no such thing as needless suffering in Elden Ring. All your sufferings and failures were absolutely necessary to make you a better player, and hopefully a better person. As Spinoza said, all things excellent are as difficult as they are rare. My hat's off to this rare, difficult, and excellent game. Thanks for watching. You know what to do down there. Get stronger like Alexander. See you next time.
Just you wait and see, friend. I'll grow even stronger. Just you wait when next we meet.